저기 제프가 다시 올라왔고요. 우리 정현욱 대표님께서 여러분의 Q&A 세션 이제 리드해 주실 거고요. 네, 마이크 저기 배터리 충전하는 거 이런 거 한 1분 정도만 기다렸다 진행할게요.
마이크 좀.
오케이. 정 대표님 거든요. 대표님 나오세요.
네.
오케이. 자, 그러면 저기 양쪽에 스탠드 마이크가 서 있으니까 우리 정 대표님께서 우리 Q&A 세션 리드해 주시겠습니다. 자, 여러분 큰 박수로 한번 시작해 볼까요? 네.
저기 Q&A를 진행할 건데요. 여기 보시면 마이크가 여기 서포터즈 서 있는 데 있잖아요. 저기 양쪽에 왼쪽에 보시는 우측에 하나, 좌측에 있는데 질문하고 싶으신 분들은 편히 손드는 게 아니고 줄 서서 발표하는, 질문하는 그런 형식으로 하도록 하겠습니다. 그래서 질문하고 싶으신 분들은 편하게 이제 여기 뒤로 쭉 라인업을 하셔가지고 양쪽으로 한 분씩 이렇게 질문을 하도록 하겠습니다. 자, 질문하실 분들은 앞으로 나와주세요. 네, 저기 한 분 나오셨고, 오케이. 네, 그러면은 우측에 계신, 질문 먼저 영어로 하셔도 되고요, 한국어로 하셔도 되고, 편하신 대로.
Okay, thank you for your good conversation, and it was quite helpful to me. My name is Jun from Promise Hope, and especially I was very interested in Jimmy Lee's genius story since I was raised from the KAIST. I have the same experience with you.
Next, Jimmy.
Okay, let's assume that I have a very, very attractive and very promising company. I want to build some global company. And then, since you're representative of the Korean investments and Silicon Valley investments, if you try to contact me, and then both of you, your side, try to invest me eagerly, what is your strong point in each side, in Korean representative side and Silicon Valley representative side? How can you persuade me to invest from you? Both of Jimmy and both Jeff and...
So we are assuming that the company and the product you're pitching is wow, right? And then it's a situation where the VCs all want to invest in you, and then how would you differentiate yourself?
Should I speak in Korean because it's like, audience Q&A? I think they're going to get translation.
Yeah.
그러니까 결론적으로 저희가 어떻게 여러분께 피치를 하실 건지를 여쭤보시는 거잖아요?
예, 맞습니다.
네네네. 아까 사실 저 같은 경우는 말씀드리면 데이비드도 얘기했지만 벤처기업 스타트업을 하는 게 매우 힘든 일인 것 같아요. 너무 힘든 일인데 결국에는 같이 할 수 있는 동반자적인 사람이 필요한 것 같고요. 그게 사람들이든 벤처 캐피털이든 동료들이든 KQ 벤처스가 그 부분에 있어서는 국내에서 가장 잘하고 있는 거 아닌가라고 생각을 하고 있습니다. 무슨 얘기냐면 아까도 말씀드렸지만 저희가 인볼브하는 부분도 있지만 저희가 투자한 수많은 회사들끼리 엄청나게 교류하면서 힘들 때는 서로 도와주고 고민 상담도 하고 하는 것 자체가 여러분들의 심리적인 어려움, 사실 스타트업을 하다 보면 매일매일 업앤다운이 있거든요. 그거를 가장 버틸 수 있게끔 해주는 게 저희 KQ의 네트워크이라고 믿기 때문에 저희가 가장 좋은 후보가 될 수 있지 않을까 생각합니다.
I think in our case, when you invest in seed, you try and build the strongest investment syndicate anyway. And so there's only maybe one company per year where we want to invest and we can't because there's just no room in the syndicate for us, especially as we write much larger checks. $500,000 is our sort of basic investment. And so that's why David and I have ended up investing in 40 or 50 companies over the years, because there's always room for people like us because we can add value in different ways. And so when I was talking this morning about doing your homework and figuring out who are the best investors for you, those are the ones you want because they're really well aligned with your sector, your category, the type of startup, and they have the strongest network, track record, just name your different sort of filters. And you should absolutely have us pitch you as well on the basis of how we can add value and why we would be one of the ones that should get, a portion of your company.
Yeah, and I would reinforce what Jeff said, and I would think very carefully for you in the scenario that you presented. It sounds like you would have many options, and you want to think about, where do I want to be in 2 years? What sort of progress do I want to make? And who are the people that can help me get there? And that can help prioritize your needs, and then you can talk to the investors and see how they can help you. And so you want to think very deliberately and not just look at the name brands and what they've done, but how they could help you. So in our case, it might be if you wanted to go to Silicon Valley, we could say, hey, we could be your eyes and ears and help you if you wanted to go internationally. So I think it's very hard to generalize investment advice because so much of it is very much specific to the company. But generally speaking, one thing you can generalize is you want to think about where you want to be and who can help you to get there.
Thank you. One more thing. Can I meet you guys on backstage after?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you very much.
네, 그러면 이제 우측 질문 부탁드리겠습니다.
안녕하세요. 세션 우선 굉장히 재미있게 들었습니다. 저는 데이비드 리님한테 질문이 있는데요. 미국에 기반을 두고 활동하시는 입장에서 아시아 쪽에서 봤을 때 가장 관심이 가는 기술 분야와 그 이유가 좀 궁금합니다. 네. 한글이라서. 예.
So the question is, what area am I interested in Asia? It's very hard for me to generalize because I will look for, I'm not as familiar with the market, so it's hard for me to think beforehand what areas where I would focus. And so there I would need to meet the founder and understand what he or she knows about the problem that's unique. So in my case, I invested in an education company. But if I were to generalize in Asia, if you think about the number of people who have wireless access or broadband access, is a much higher number than in the US. So what are people doing with their phones? It might be messaging. How are they using, for example, obviously Kakao and Line are very popular. What are some of the behaviors there? What do they understand that other people's don't? Shopping with their phone. Is there something unique about that? And so those are the areas, if I were to generalize, that I would say, hey, those are areas that would be interesting to me. Education is another area. John mentioned it earlier. Asian parents, Asians, we love education. So anything that we can do to help us learn better and score better, we're going to pay for. And so if somebody can do that using mobile technology in a creative and new way, then I'll be very interested.
감사합니다. 네.
네, 그러면 좌측 번 질문 부탁드리겠습니다.
네, 안녕하세요. 저는 주식회사 스마트웨어의 전무로 있는 변준형이라고 합니다. 저희가 2년 동안 해가지고 교육 솔루션을 6개를 개발을 했습니다. 이제 그저께 프린트물이 나와가지고 오늘 급하게 왔습니다. 저희가 투자 부분도 부분이지만 영업 부분으로 해가지고 좀 제휴 부분이라든지 이게 굉장히 관심이 있어서요. 그래서 지금 질문을 드립니다. 예를 들어 저희 6개 중에서 하나는 이제 부정 시험 방지 솔루션을 가지고 있습니다. 이게 그 목표는 국내적으로 해가지고.
죄송합니다. 그 질문 요지만 말씀을 좀
네네.
드릴게요.
토익이나 토플 쪽으로 해가지고 시험 쪽으로 해서 저희 그 회사 쪽으로 해가지고 투자를 만약에 받으려고 한다면 혹은 영업 제휴를 하려면 어떻게 하면 되겠습니까? 다 여기 있는 계신 분들 모든 다른 사람들의 뭐 똑같은 질문이겠지만 제가 너무 그 광범위하게 얘기했나요? 네, 죄송합니다.
사실 어떻게 지금 다시 질문을 이해해 보면
네.
사실 여기 스테이지에서 좀 잘 안 들리거든요. 네, 근데 어쨌든 다시 질문을 들어보면 어떻게 하면 컨택을 해서 투자를 유치하고 또 영업에도 도움을 받을 수 있냐 이거 맞죠?
네, 맞습니다.
네, 네. 가장 좋은 방법은 저희가 믿을 만한 사람들한테 말씀을 하셔서 그분을 통해서 저희한테 오시는 게 제일 빠를 것 같아요. 그러니까 저희가 믿는 사람이 이 솔루션은 정말 좋다 라고 하면 저희가 아무래도 조금 더 신경을 쓸 수밖에 없는 거고요. 물론 저희 이제 뭐 홈페이지에 있는 비즈니스 플랜 쪽으로 보내주셔도 저희가 다 검토합니다. 그런데 약간의 팁을 드리자면 저희가 투자한 회사든 저희랑 관계가 있는 사람들이든 이런 분들한테 약간 먼저 와우를 보여주시고 나서 그분들이 저희한테 매우 강하게 이 회사 너무 좋은 것 같아요 라고 한다면 저희가 훨씬 더 빠르게 인볼브 될 수 있을 것 같습니다.
네, 감사합니다. 네.
And I think everybody would answer the same way. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Peter. I'm a Korean American, but working at a Korean startup right now. And our startup actually applied to Y Combinator the last batch, but we didn't get in. But applying helped us really learn a lot about the investment ecosystem in Silicon Valley. And this question is for Jeff and David, I guess. But so we kind of saw that old VCs, they used to be very finance guys, investing in business plans, and you guys, your models are more very tech-centric, investing in products. And we got to see that evolution. But I was just wondering, like nowadays, the accelerator and SV Angel model is very established, micro accelerators for Jeff. But what do you see as like the biggest ways that the current investment model can be improved? Because like our startup, like we still plan on trying to get global investing partners, but we'll have to go to Silicon Valley, network, get referrals. And it's like we're thinking of it as a 6-month, 1-year process, you know? But what are some ways in the model that you think in the future will be greatly improved to help us like work on product and stuff like that?
I think David touched upon that in his talk, which is how can we still provide a lot of value while being sort of centered on Silicon Valley, but look at opportunities like yours more efficiently. Because what we know is, we know what we are good at and what we're not so good at. And our experiences at investing in a few European startups, and we only did 5 investments in Europe out of 145 investments. It's actually not that great, because helping, supporting remotely, even if we are the eyes and ears of the company in Silicon Valley, is actually very challenging. So we actually are pulling back from that. What we've done in the last fund is we found a couple of really interesting UK companies, so based in London, and we actually moved them. So the founders actually got in the plane, and we figured out how to help them with their visas. And 2 companies that are made up of 4 British founders are actually crushing it in Silicon Valley. And we thought that because of what they were building, they had a truly global concept that would just fare well in our market. And I actually don't really have the right answer here as to how we could expand our footprint. Our friend Dave McClure has done a lot of investments abroad, and we'll see how well he's done. Our challenge is that we get actually pretty involved in the companies on product marketing, we take board seats and so on and so forth, and doing that remotely is very, very hard.
Yeah, I would I agree with everything there, and the one sort of wrinkle that I would add is that, at least in the US, there's a trend called crowdfunding, which I think is the most important trend in the way startups get funded in the last 50 years. And the way I say that, the reason why I say that, and this is websites like Kickstarter, WeFunder, AngelList, at least in the US, the laws that cover how investors, they were created in the 1930s. And those laws are now being changed. And that creates an entirely new set of investors to access. So if I were in your position, what I would do is I would build something that people love, show it to a whole new set of investors, and in the best case scenario, you build something, it gets really popular, or it gets a lot of adoption, and then people will sort of barge down your doors to invest. And so that's a much different model, and it's actually a model that that for us is very disruptive, because I can talk about how much help we provide and so forth and so on, but ultimately, the startups need the money. That's the most important thing, generally speaking. And so I think that can be a very important or useful avenue. And then because that, Jack Dorsey once told me, when you show your startup, when you present a startup, you want to show, don't tell. Don't tell people what you're going to do, show them what you've done. And if you can do that by getting funding through other people, like the AngelList, and again, I'm only talking about the US, the laws may be different overseas, but that's the first place I'd look.
Oh, I'd love to discuss it afterwards, thanks.
Sure.
네, 그럼 좌측 말씀드릴
Hi, my name is Jay Chung, and I'm actually practicing law in Korea. And then I used to be a programmer myself, and then I'm trying to get back into entrepreneurial business in future. So my question right now is that I think when I was working in Silicon Valley, there was a culture that userification was the most important part, and that monetization was really not important part of the equation when angel investors or venture capitalists is investing money into the company. But how is that climate different now? And especially in light of the mobile market emergence, we can see that the old monetization model, except that paid-in ad purchases, doesn't work anymore. The banners or the advertisement is not working. But how do you, as an early stage investor, how do you see that this landscape of the mobile market is changing in terms of the monetization scheme?
So it's true that the traditional economics of mobile have changed because user acquisition and CPI prices have gone up, and what the cash you actually make with in-app purchases or whatever has actually decreased. So only gaming companies actually can still make sense in that equation. However, there are other ways to. There are other ways to monetize. There are other ways to get users to pay for your services, which are not only the traditional. What has been tried and true will sort of evolve, and so we're always looking at two things. One is new ways to monetize, and we are making investments in companies that are trying to break the old model. Or, if you are doing things in the B2B world, which is a lot of our investment strategy has been focused on that over the past 18 months, you just do a SaaS model applied to mobile. In that case, you don't have to use in-app purchasing or whatever. You just get people to pay a subscription. So, as we spend more time in the enterprise, we have less of that issue. It's true that the pure B2C plays where you really focus on product, user acquisition, and retention, and you assume that you will figure out monetization later for some hot startups and applications, it still works for them. But some investors will be comfortable investing in those, and some investors won't.
How about yourself? Would you invest in a company that has a good potential for user acquisition and retention?
We'll consider it, but we haven't done many of those over the past 12 to 18 months. Like I said, we've actually found a ton of opportunities in sort of vertical markets in B2B, which I call, B2B making money and sexy. And they are actually scaling really fast. And unlike, because the issue with the B2C market is if ever someone figures out something, interesting, you will have 10 copies of that company within 2 weeks and 30 within 6 weeks. And it's just not that interesting for us. But like I said, other investors might very well be really interested in talking to you.
I'll answer in English because I think maybe you might not understand Korean.
저 한국말 이해합니다.
Really? Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. 저희 KK벤처스 같은 경우는 유저가 있는 데에 투자는 무조건 하고요. 크게 보면 두 가지로 좀 나눌 수 있는 것 같아요. 이제는 모네티제이션이 없는 회사는 투자를 안 한다는 얘기도 있는데 저는 그렇게 생각하지 않고요. 중요한 거는 근데 이제 사람들이 너무 좋아하는 그래서 거의 매일매일 접속할 만한 그런 서비스를 만든다면 그러니까 무슨 얘기냐면은 10만 명, 20만 명이 쓰는 서비스를 만들면 그거는 좀 어려운 것 같고요. 만약에 1000만 명이 쓸 수 있는 그런 서비스를 만든다. 그러면 돈은 자연스럽게 따라오는 것 같거든요. 카카오가 어떻게 보면 가장 큰 예시인 것 같고 2년 전만 해도 한국에 있는 많은 벤처 캐피털 아니면 많은 인더스트리 엑스퍼트들이 카카오는 유저는 몇 천만 명이지만 돈을 어떻게 벌 거냐 이거를 항상 얘기했었지만 당연히 돈은 버는 거예요. 왜냐면은 매일매일 3천만 명이 접속하는 그런 서비스에 돈을 못 버는 거는 사실 말이 안 된다고 생각하거든요. 그래서 내가 만드는 서비스가 엄청나게 많은 사람들이 리텐션 높게 쓸만한 프로덕이면 그 방향으로 쭉 가는 것도 하나의 방법인 것 같고요. 내가 만들고 있는 프로덕이 되게 니치 마켓이에요. 아무리 봐도 뭐 20만 명, 30만 명, 50만 명밖에 못 쓰는 서비스라면 처음부터 비즈니스 모델을 고려해서 모네티제이션 할 수 있게끔 빌드하는 게 되게 좋은 방법인 것 같습니다.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I think the one thing that I will say is that in the U.S., the investors are, if you look at the companies in the past, whether it be Facebook, Twitter, even Google, these are companies that didn't make any money and they had very high valuations, but then they were able to grow into that. And so it depends on what you're building. But I think the critical difference, depending on where you are, is that you have a set of investors in the US who are used to that, and they can be very patient. And there's a company right now where we're an investor called Snapchat. And it's a company where you take a picture, and you send it to somebody, and it disappears. And a lot of people can argue as to whether or not you can make money there. And I happen to believe that you can, especially if you build an engaged audience. But regardless of your point of view on that company, there are investors who are willing to pour in literally hundreds of millions of dollars and not think about a business model. And if you are going to focus on investors in Korea or other parts of the country who don't have that viewpoint, then that could also shade your decision as to which product to build.
Thank you.
네, 우측 질문 부탁드리겠습니다.
예, 안녕하세요. 제가 좀 고민이 있어서 나왔는데요. 한 14년 정도 이렇게 연구하고 아이디어 개발하는 기간이 그렇게 오래 걸렸거든요. 그랬는데 이제 그런 거는 제가 잘 하는데 너무 오래 긴 시간에 이게 고민 만드느라고 제가 좀 어려운 점이 많아요. 그런데 이제 이것을 어떻게 PR하고 어떻게 누구한테 얘기하기도 참 힘들고 제가 개발한 것은 IT 분야가 아닙니다. 뭐냐면은 1+3 체어라고요. 1+3 체어 이제 거기다 또 이제 데스크 책상도 들어가죠. 근데 그게 지금
죄송합니다만
전 세계적으로 해서
대표님 죄송합니다만 그 질문 요지만 좀 부탁드릴게요.
예.
어떤 부분들을 어떤 걸 좀 여쭤보셨지만 좀 부탁드리겠습니다.
예. 사실 이런 모임이 우리나라에서는 처음 같아요. 그래서 여기 찾느라고 참 한 달가량 헤맸거든요. 근데 이제 그래서 이제 이 새로 만든 것을 저는 그런 거는 잘하는데 이제 남한테 피하라고 광고하는 걸 몰라가지고 그 고민 때문에 나왔어요. 그래서
네.
이걸 어떻게 해야 되나 싶어서 여기 모든 나오신 분들한테 저 고민 좀 털어놓으려고 나왔습니다.
네, 예, 그러면 그 질문은 제가 그 PR과 광고 쪽은 끝나고 나서 제가 좀 말씀을 드려서 제가 좀 도움을 드릴 수 있도록 하겠습니다.
아, 예, 네. 감사합니다.
감사합니다. 네, 그러면 이제 좌측 질문 부탁드릴게요. 네.
First of all, thank you for the great session. I'm April. I'm a CEO and founder of the company called Chatting Cat. It's an instant correction service. My question is that my company is based in Seattle, Washington, and now I am in Korea for last 6 weeks. And there are a lot of money from the government and angel investors, things like that in Korea. And I'm considering to move the company to Korea for the government grant and funding. And also, I get a lot of attraction from business-to-business opportunity in Korea. But at the same time, I hear from mentors or investors that once I move the company to Korea, the valuation will be bad, and it's not a good idea. So I wonder what you think as an investor point of view.
I think you should go where your network is the strongest. And so if you feel like you have a competitive advantage because you have a very strong network here in Korea versus some of the other companies, I would move here. And this is generalizing after hearing a very quick question. It's very hard to generalize this type of information. For sure, US-based investors will be more hesitant because of the geographical issues. But I would much rather own a smaller piece of a big thing than a big piece of a small thing. And so in a lot of ways, the valuation shouldn't really matter as much. What should matter is, where can I go to have the greatest competitive advantage? And so what we're seeing in the US, you're seeing some companies being started in Seattle, in Texas, in Boston, which was historically a great place and not so much anymore. And the reason why they're doing that is because hiring is so hard in Silicon Valley and New York. And unless you are a Twitter or Snapchat or Dropbox, it's very hard to hire. And so if you feel like that this can give you a competitive advantage, particularly with the government grants, my bias would be to move where you have your strength. But of course, there are other considerations, but that's my initial impression.
Thank you. Is there any other opinion as a Korean investor?
I tried the translator, and the translator is really good, so I'll speak in Korean. 이런 것 같아요. 조심스럽게 말씀드리면 정답은 이미 알고 계실 것 같다는 생각이 좀 있습니다. 무슨 얘기냐면 데이비드 얘기한 것처럼 competitive advantage도 하나의 중요한 거고요. 고객이 어디 있는지 내 서비스를 프루브하는 그 실제 고객이 한국 사람들 중심이라면 한국에 계시는 게 더 맞는 것 같고요. 결국에는 proof of concept을 하셔야 되는데 그게 아니라 이게 미국에서 증명하고 싶은 서비스라면 아무리 government grant가 있어도 사실 미국에서 좀 더 트라이를 해보는 게 맞을 수도 있을 것 같습니다. 네, 저는 일단 고객이 있는 곳에서 하는 게 맞지 않을까 생각합니다.
네, 감사합니다.
네, 그러면 이제 우측 좀.
Hi, I'm Tony. I'm running a Bitcoin company. This is a short survey for the panel. What are your opinions on Bitcoin and virtual currencies?
Great question.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, we're tracking the developments in Bitcoin like everyone else in Silicon Valley. We haven't made any investment or bet in the space yet. Don't know whether we will or not. So we're tracking it.
So we're tracking it as well. We just made one investment in Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin or its successor is is something that's massively disruptive. And the reason why is I don't understand currencies. You know, it's not my area of expertise. I don't understand sort of the monetary system and fiat currencies. But what I do think is that I think we're headed for a world that is multipolar. And by that I mean the US doesn't have the same sort of primacy that it had in the 10 years ago. And if you believe in that world, if you believe in a world where there isn't one currency backed by a government that's the dominant currency, or at least has its power diminished, then something like Bitcoin will exist. And many people think Bitcoin is that the first mover advantage for something like Bitcoin is so important that it will be Bitcoin. But you could make the argument, as one entrepreneur made to me a month ago, that Bitcoin is like Napster. That Napster was the most revolutionary product out there because it fundamentally changed the way people think about media. And so whether it's Bitcoin or a progeny of Bitcoin or an offspring, I think it will happen, and founders who work on it it's going to be a massive, massive opportunity.
네, 그러면 좌측 질문 부탁드리겠습니다.
Hi, I'm a student of a business school in Korea University, and I just decided to speak in English. I would thank you for this great session, and I feel like I'm in Silicon Valley. Thank you for that. And I just wondering that there are so many people, so many students who are not in engineer-based. I mean, there are so many business school students, and then so many different kind of area student, and I'm really interested in being a VC. And before that, I want to found my own company. And there are so many students like me, and I was wondering, what degree do you think I should be educated in technology? I mean, there is one of the biggest companies, Samsung. They just hired employees who are in a technology base, and they offer the education for the specific employees for the IT knowledge. And what do you think that kind of policy, and what degree I should need, what kind of education program I should need to be a VC or to get started, startup that is IT-based company?
I think it's super hard because, by definition, I mean, you never really sort of think about or plan to be a VC. You just meet someone who thinks that you would be good at it, and you're brought in, right? So it was Ron for you, it was John Tyson for me, and so I think do whatever you're passionate about, and hang out with entrepreneurs, and if you do your own company, and at some point, once you have built a lot of personal sort of experience, if you think that you're good at going to the other side, what we call the dark side, then that might happen. It's very hard to, I mean, we have people who are associates and principals in venture firms that are with business school backgrounds and do a lot of financial models or whatever, but we believe fundamentally that the only reason why we're good is because we were in your shoes as entrepreneurs, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, 15 years ago. And so it's hard for me to answer that, and we get the question a lot in the US, like, what should I do to become sort of a VC? And I say, well, don't plan for it, and maybe it will actually happen to you, like it happened to me. And I was actually never planning. I mean, if you had told me that I would become a VC, I would say, nah, never, because I was really sort of a tech guy.
A little bit. 아까 사실 제가 세션 중에서도 말씀드렸지만 저는 제가 VC가 될 줄 몰랐어요. 그래서 여기 지금 3명이 다 똑같이 VC가 될 줄 몰랐다고 지금 대답을 하신 것 같거든요. 그런 것만 보더라도 이게 뭔가 스텝 바이 스텝으로 밟아나가는 거는 아닌 것 같고요. 그리고 세계 최고의 벤처 캐피털리스트는 그러면 엔터프레너 출신이어야 되느냐? 그것도 되게 컨트로버셜한 이슈인 것 같아요. MBA 출신의 컨설팅 출신의 너무 좋은 벤처 캐피털리스트 존재하고 엔터프레너 출신의 너무 좋은 벤처 캐피털리스트 존재해요. 그래서 어떻게 보면 아까 제프가 얘기한 것처럼 이 엔터프레너십 아니면 스타트업 월드의 진정성을 갖고 여러분이 가장 하고 싶은 일을 하다 보면 어느 순간 이 만나는 접점이 생길 수 있을 거라고 생각을 합니다. 네, 제가 말씀드릴 수 있는 건 그 정도인 것 같아요.
And I think to answer your direct question about what I would study, if I were in your shoes and if I were non-technical, the one area where I would study is statistics and data science. I think whatever you do as a non-technical person will be driven by data. Whether you work in an electronics company, biotechnology company, whether you work for a retail company. I think those business professionals who are comfortable with numbers, who understand how to make data-driven decisions. In the US, it's called data science, and there's a whole new category of data scientists. And there are people that are getting paid a lot of money for that area of expertise. And I would just focus on that area if I were to pick one. And I would echo what what Jeff and Jimmy said about not trying to plan your career, but tactically and practically, that's where I would spend my time.
If I may just add from my personal experience, I have a son who's now turning into, well, he's a teenager and he's now already exploring career, what he should do. It used to be that Korean parents, especially in the United States, push their children to become lawyers, doctors, accountants, and so on. But the next gen parents, at least I didn't study computer science or statistics. My wife studied computer science and statistics at Stanford. So I tell my son, be like your mom, not like your dad. But and there's a whole movement in the United States about having every kid in America learn to code, and I think whatever you study as concentration or whatever, but if you can take programming classes while in college or grad school, because that will help you understand how product builders and product designers work anyways, even if you don't code on a daily basis. And so if I could choose one field, along with what David is saying, statistics, computer science, learning to code, even by yourself with tools like Codecademy, which is a portfolio company of SB Angel, right? Yeah. So yeah, that's just my addition.
Thank you.
그리고 우측 질문 부탁드리겠습니다.
예, 앱센터에서 모바일 마케팅 컨설팅을 하고 있는 심규병이라고 합니다. 요새 이제 온라인과는 다르게 모바일 리워드 시장에 대해서 좀 VC들 입장은 어떤 식으로 바라보고 있는지, 글로벌리 투자라든지 국내에서의 보는 시각, 리워드 시장에 대한 부분을 어떻게 생각하시는지 좀 여쭤보고 싶습니다. 모바일 리워드 앱, 리워드 플랫폼 비즈니스요.
So, like I said at the beginning, we actually are always sort of looking for new ways to monetize either emerging ecosystems or existing ecosystems by doing sort of the next generation of whatever has been in place. So we've done a couple of CPI networks that basically use other mechanisms than what Tapjoy or AppGratis, which has gotten into hot waters with Apple recently. So we're trying to understand what is flowed with the current systems and try and see whether we can do something which is 100x better in terms of performance. Because if it's not 100x better, it's not worth it. So we're spending quite a bit of time looking at those, and we've done a couple of experiments in terms of investments as to whether they will continue to grow big. Because there is so much demand in terms of acquiring users on mobile. Every CPI network that gets started is actually successful in scaling, and they double revenue every month, and it's pretty crazy. The question is, are they sustainable, and can they, build a business in the long term? And that I don't know yet, because by definition, we don't know how the operators of the app stores like Apple or Google might actually change the game. Like it happened for AppGratis a few weeks ago, where they were doing extremely well, but guess what? They got shut down because they were really, there was the gray line, and they were on the wrong side of the gray line from the standpoint of Apple's terms of services.
데이비드? 질문에 답이 되셨나요?
예, 그 글로벌 입장에서는 약간 부정적이라는 견해로 저는 받아들였고요. 국내에서 보시는 시각은 어떤지?
그 CPI 모델이 기본적으로 돈을 좀 벌고 있는 건 맞는 것 같습니다. 맞는 것 같고요. 근데 전 제프의 의견이랑 되게 동의하는데 뭐냐면은 rule of the game을 플랫폼 홀더가 바꿀 수가 있잖아요. 예를 들자면 다운로드를 많이 하는 거가 랭킹에 다른 식으로 적용이 된다면 CPI를 하는 되게 많은 이유 중에 하나가 랭킹에 위로 올라가기 위해서이거든요. 왜냐면은 다운로드 받자마자 지우는 사람들이 되게 많기 때문에 사실은 real 유저를 attract 하기 위해서라기보다는 많이 노출되고 싶은 게 없지 않아 있는데 그런 원칙들이 혹시 플랫폼 홀더들이 바꿔버리면 그 회사한테는 너무나 큰 리스크일 수는 있을 것 같습니다. 네, 그렇다고 안 된다는 건 아니지만 네, 그 리스크는 정말 있습니다.
Yeah, I wasn't sort of negative. I was saying that you have to be extremely prudent as to what you do. And a good example is, if you look at most of the successful CPI networks right now, their top 9 clients are gaming companies, and maybe the top 10 is a brand. And so what I want to see is, in the top 10 mix, 3 gaming companies and 7 brands. Because that means that there is actually, an ability to build a long-term relationship and essentially have the brand as an advertiser, because the CPI network is nothing but an advertising network. So that's really the way we sort of look at it to see whether we can build, the next Tapjoy or, I'm not even sure whether Tapjoy will be a sort of a big exit or big outcome, but certainly they look like something which has done well.
네, 감사합니다. 그럼 좌측 질문 부탁드리겠습니다.
It's really an honor for me to speak in front of you. And I'm a student of KAIST, and my name is Sung-Soo Kim. And actually, I was in Silicon Valley last year attending co-founder programs. And we think, every entrepreneur thinks that we are really interested we are really dreaming of going to Silicon Valley one day. Not only in Korea, but like any other countries, entrepreneurs, they think too. So my question is actually, we are in a point of having people and team together. So my question is, what is the team making strategy and item strategy when we try to do our business, not only in Korea, but also outside of this, to Silicon Valley? So do we have to focus more on Korean business, or should we make our strategy that we can actually be on the later, that we can go to Silicon Valley?
I would if I'm understanding your correction correctly, okay. You're asking that would I focus on, given that you are interested in moving to Silicon Valley or locating in Silicon Valley, do you focus on Korean customers or US-based customers? Is that correct?
That one is one of my questions. And the other question is, we are trying to make a team culture. And that time, should we focus more of global people to be in our team, or should more focused on Korean business?
It's for me. I think I'll repeat what Jimmy said earlier in terms of tailoring some of these questions based on the product that you build and the customers that you're trying to reach, whether they are in Korea or whether they're in the U.S. I do think some of the principles, some of the culture, some of the values of Silicon Valley type technology companies are spreading worldwide, and so I think you have an opportunity to build that culture here in Korea or in Silicon Valley, regardless of where you're geographically located. But I would really focus on your product first and who you're trying to reach, and then that will inform what you do. Because I do think, and one thing I will say is that you really, I mean, where you start and the culture that you build in the first 10 employees is really you're setting the DNA and the blueprint for your company for the next 5 years.
I think the so David mentioned that the number one hurdle for companies in the Valley now is hiring. It's really, really hard to find talented developers, designers, data scientists, super difficult. And so if you have a very strong team here and you're building a product which has a real sort of global footprint, you just happen to start in Korea, it's actually okay, provided that you understand that it's not for the Korean market, it's something which has a global potential. And we've had recently a few companies that happen to start, for example, with a team in Croatia that we funded with the understanding that the CEO and the sales and marketing was going to move to the States, actually Ohio, not Silicon Valley because it's a farming product, but I won't get into the details. And we're very excited about the fact that those guys are experts in their domains out of Croatia with the notion of building a global sales platform from the US. And we funded them. But it was really a unique circumstance where I don't think I would have found a US entrepreneur that was that passionate about farming. Right? So, and yes, the logo of the company is a cow. So depending on your specific circumstance, building a very, unique product which has a global, potential footprint and having the right team that you bring together, and that might mean getting some US executives, as part of the US team the day you sort of build it or you move to the US. But you can't really sort of do a half-assed job at committing to the US. It's either you go and focus on the US and go for it and put all the potential sort of, all the chances on your side, or you don't. It's not really sort of something you can do as a byproduct of what you're doing.
And I just want to add one more thing. On the one thing that I will say is that with a mobile phone, for a lot of the technologists in the room, they say the killer feature of the mobile phone is that it knows where you are. Its location, its Foursquare. And I would actually say that the mobile device actually kills location, and it makes location less important. So this question is very important, but it actually, in the next few years, it may become less important because your ability to reach audiences, your ability to build a team using mobile technology may make location less important. And so I think that's something to keep in mind as you think about your beginnings.
Thank you very much.
네, 우측 질문 부탁드리겠습니다.
Hello, my name is Sang-Min Jeon. I just graduated from business school and preparing for my own business here in Korea. My question is about your first of all, thank you for your nice speech, and I learned a lot from your insights. And my question is about your preference, and I've seen many startups which is doing not really innovative business, but just like stable business like e-commerce, something like that. And if you choose a company between stable e-commerce startups or a company with very innovative ideas but not very proven in the market, which one do you prefer between those two companies?
저는 사실 둘 다 좋은 것 같고요. 이커머스도 이커머스 나름인 것 같아요. 이커머스가 꼭 스테이블하고 작아야 된다고 생각하는 것 자체가 약간 편견일 수도 있지 않나라는 생각이 들고요. 이커머스조차도 사실은 의미 있는 이노베이션을 한다면 플라이 할 수 있는 거고 미국에서 되게 많은 fab.com 같은 것들이 보여주고 있는 거기 때문에 이커머스는 섹시하지 않다라고 생각하는 거는 일단 좀 아니지 않을까라는 생각이 하나 있고 개인적으로는 사실은 아까도 얘기한 것처럼 빅 프로블럼을 태클링하는 약간 이노베이티브한 컴퍼니들을 더 선호하긴 합니다. 저는. 네.
네.
Yeah, I think the success of our business as VCs is predicated on our ability to identify companies that will have a chance to become big. And they might be doing something in a very traditional market. And yes, Fab, and we were investors in the seed round of Fab. Fab is sort of the next generation of e-commerce company, which will potentially become a brand name as well known as IKEA or Amazon for very specific sort of products with a very specific experience. And therefore it's e-commerce, but it's in a way that hasn't been done before because they're leveraging, you know, social and mobile sort of in the best possible sort of way compared to their competitors. But I would say we call those investments sort of high beta. So probability of success, very low, but if ever it works, very high return. And as David said, if in your portfolio you manage to have one or two of those sort of multi-billion-dollar companies, then you will do well. So that's what we bet for.
Yeah, so we have 5 minutes left, so 빨리 진행하도록 하겠습니다. 그럼 좌측 좀 부탁드리겠습니다.
Hi, my name is JY, and I'm 23 years old, and I'm studying at the SoftTech, the engineering school. And right now I'm reading my team with my good buddies, and it's very impressed that my face is on the screen. So, anyway, so let us put aside the business and strategies or market trends that we have talked about right now. So my question is right now, as the person who's leading my team, is what makes me wake up every morning. So, because you have seen a lot of entrepreneurs, and you have raised them successfully, and you are also the entrepreneurs from different countries and cultures, from the friends and states whose parents are Korean or. So I'm just curious about your motivations and what makes you work, or the other entrepreneurs' works, the stories.
So if the question is directed toward, is it entrepreneurs or is it us?
For both, but
Yeah.
I think anything is fine because I just want to listen.
So I'll share one story. Mark Zuckerberg, who's the founder of Facebook, he spoke publicly, and he was talking about the origins of how Facebook started. And he said this exactly. He said, this just needed to exist in the world. And he also said that the company, starting a company just got in the way of what he wanted to do. And then the next day, Jack Dorsey, who's the founder of Twitter and also Square, he was speaking at a conference that we held, and he was telling entrepreneurs that money to him was just like oxygen. And the only reason why he starts a company is because it enables his ideas to exist in the world. And so those are obviously two outliers, but if you're going to start a company and if you're going to ask people to follow you in something that is completely irrational, you have to be the one that has almost an irrational belief in what you're doing. And just almost a missionary cause that this needs to exist. It's bigger than money. It's bigger than a cause. And that's just one case. I mean, I don't want to say, I mean, there are many companies that start with much smaller ambitions, but generally speaking, as a rule of thumb, you want to be the person that has that passion and that irrational belief that others follow you. And I think, I can't speak for the other founders here, or excuse me, the other people on the panel here, but for me, I know that's too hard for me. And so for me to be able to be a part of that process and to see that one person who says, this is what it's going to look like, and then 5 years later, that's what it looks like, that's pretty fun. So that's why I work in this profession.
I know the time is running out, but just one more question, simple question. Can I ask your watch's brand name after this session? I can't take my off there. Yeah, watches. Yeah. Can I?
Sure. We can talk offline, I guess.
Right.
Or,
Thank you.
Yeah.
네, 감사합니다. 네, 우측 질문 부탁드리겠습니다.
네, 안녕하세요. 저는 LHS라는 회사를 운영하고 있는 이훈이라고 합니다. 저희가 그 실리콘밸리에 가서 VC한테 이제 피치하고 비즈니스 플랜을 프레젠테이션 할 기회를 얻게 돼서 지금 준비를 하고 있는데, 아까 임준 대표님께서 말씀하셨듯이 풀기 어려운 문제를 저희가 풀려고 하고 있고, 그리고 데이비드 리 씨께서 말씀하셨듯이 저는 미쳐 있죠, 그 문제에. 그렇지만 그 미침을 이제 투자자에게 전달을 해야 되는데 비즈니스 플랜이나 뭐 피치를 준비하다 보면 저희가 이제 테크놀로지 베이스드 회사이기 때문에 제품이나 뭐 이런 거에 대해서는 설명을 잘 할 수가 있는데 비즈니스 플랜이 제품만 가지고는 되는 게 아니라 이제 파이낸셜적인 분야라든지 뭐 세일즈 분야라든지 뭐 마케팅 이런 것도 이제 플랜을 다 적도록 돼 있는데, 만약에 이제 어떤 회사의 CEO가 만약에 프레젠테이션이나 피칭을 할 때 그 제품과 뭐 그 외에 파이낸셜적인 문제의 어떤 그 비중이나 그런 것들이 어느 정도 뭐 느낌으로 다가오시는지 그런 걸 한번 묻고 싶고요. 그리고 두 번째는 미국에서 사업을 하기 위해서는 이제 특허가 반드시 뭐 필요한 경우가 많다고 그렇게 이야기를 하는데, 그 미국에서 벤처를 하는 데 있어서 어떤 특허 문제 그런 거에 대해서 좀 질문 드리고 싶습니다.
구체적으로 뭐 데이비드.
Well, I'll just take the patent. You don't need a patent to raise money in Silicon Valley. It depends on the industry, but for Jeff and I, we focus on software, so you don't need a patent. And so I wouldn't let that deter you. And I'll let Jeff answer the first part.
Yeah, I think the issue with the founder who's going to pitch us, we have to sort of see this deep passion that David was talking about. We want to see sort of a big idea. We want to sort of understand what got you there and why you think that you're the best person on the planet to actually tackle that big vision. And that's sort of the irrational part, as in, you know, if you want to go and send people to the moon, you know, we might say it's irrational, but if you have actually a plan that you can show us and say, hey, this is why I think it's feasible, we'll sort of listen, and we might think you're a nutcase, but doesn't mean that we won't invest. The issue is, we want to know why you and your team are just the best position for that particular opportunity and why you're so passionate about it. And for us, it's really product technology. That's the most important. The financials, you know, if you give us a 5-year plan, it's bullshit anyway, because you don't know, you know, how things are going to turn out. What we want to know is, what do you need from us in terms of, you know, sort of a budget or the fundraising that you're going through. What is it that you're going to do for the next 18 months or 2 years that gets you to the next level of financing and proves to other potential investors that you're worthy of whatever is next, you know, $5 million, $7 million, $8 million raise or whatever. So for us, it's more understanding what you want to build and what you want to prove thanks to our money. And we think that this is actually, you know, potentially delusional, but still worth a shot.
And again, it's very hard to generalize because I agree 100% with Jeff, and it's very hard to generalize because some of the best founders that we've worked with have had some of the most awkward and awful first meetings. But if I were to generalize, I would say that people respond to stories. And so the more that you can incorporate storytelling into what you do and why you're doing this and why you're going to sacrifice the next 5 to 10 years of your most productive life to do this, the more you can communicate that, the better chance, in my opinion, that you'll have in that resonating with investors who want to invest in irrational people.
I think, you know, just to David's point, I think the Pinterest pitch I got was one of the worst ones I had ever seen. And so I passed.
그러면 이제 시간 다 돼서 마지막 질문 받도록 하겠습니다. 뒤에 계신 분들한테 죄송합니다.
David, Jimmy, Jeff, first of all, thank you for the great stage. My name is Ki-hung with StrongVentures. I'm actually John Nam's partner in crime. This is actually a question for all of you. You know, you are very successful in finding great teams, investing in great companies. But personally, would you ever start your own business someday, other than, you know, the VC and the investing side?
Well, I will actually give you a cheesy answer because it's actually what I've done with SoftTech. SoftTech is the business I started back in 2004, and the way I look at it is I sort of proved the business, bootstrapping it with my own money for 3 years, and then I raised my first fund, my second fund, and, you know, so SoftTech is actually a startup in the way I think about it. So that's my cheesy answer.
Yep.
저는 솔직히 말씀드리면 스타트업의 CEO가 될 자신이 없습니다. 자신이 없고요. 두 가지 이유가 있는데 첫 번째는 제 성격과 러닝 커브랑 관련되어 있는 것 같은데 유망한 분야일 경우에는 사실 경쟁자가 분명히 생기기 마련이고요. 제가 볼 때는 거기서 이기는 거는 99점과 100점의 그 1점 사이로 이기는 것 같거든요. 그렇기 위해서는 엄청난 디테일로 들어가야 됩니다. 근데 저 같은 경우는 이제 제 속성인데 0부터 95까지는 되게 빨리 가는데 그 뒤는 조금 지쳐하고 재미없어 하는 성격이 있어서요. 아마도 제가 사업을 하면 망하지 않을까 라고 생각을 하고요. 두 번째는 제가 원래 호기심 천국이라서요. 이것저것 다 같이 막 이렇게 멀티태스킹하고 저글링하는 걸 너무 좋아해서 네, VC가 너무 저한테 재밌는 것 같습니다.
There's no way that I would start my own company. I mentioned it earlier. The first entrepreneur that I knew is my dad. He's probably mentally the strongest person that I know. And starting a company is, I mentioned that it's irrational. I mean, I compare it to taking a hammer and pounding it against a rock for 5 years of your life. And you sacrifice everything. You sacrifice your friends, you sacrifice your social life, you sacrifice a lot of things in your personal life with the expectation that nothing will happen. And that there's that 1 in 1,000 chance that you hit that rock and water will come out. Something completely that no one else will believe in. And I don't think a lot of people will have that tenacity or strength to do that. There are those that have that. And those are hopefully the people that we invest in. But I think that is more important than intelligence, business sense, or anything. That sort of stick-to-itness and tenacity is something that I believe all the great founders have. And I just, for that particular exercise, no way do I have it.
Thank you.
Yeah. And thank you so much, Jeff and Jimmy and Dave and John. So this last chance is we are very honored to have you here. Really, really honored. And we really hope you hear about your last advice and comment for Korean entrepreneurs as a last chance so that Korean entrepreneurs can be inspired. So please share your idea about 20 or 30 seconds.
So I want to thank you for being with us today. And last time, so 3.5 years ago, I was at a similar conference and came to Q&A time, and no one showed up to ask any questions. So thank you so much for actually participating and actually doing it. You know, English or Korean doesn't matter. And you know, like I said at the end of my talk this morning, I really feel, having been 3 times in Korea over the past 5 years, I really see a lot of really positive developments in what's happening here. And so I wish you the very best, and I look forward to hearing about, you know, the first of few successes that go from Korean companies to global companies. And yeah, you know, if you need a dollar or two, we can have a chat.
Thanks. 네, Jimmy.
네, 먼저 이렇게 사실 실리콘밸리에서 유명하신 분들이 한국에 오는 것 자체가 어떻게 보면 한국이 사실은 글로벌에서 조금 더 인정을 받는 거라는 걸 하나 보여주는 거라고 여러분들은 좀 이해해 주셨으면 좋겠고요. 지금 실리콘밸리에서 한국의 그 위상이라고 해야 될까요? 관심도, 인터레스트가 많이 올라갔어요. 제가 볼 때는. 그래서 이런 분들이 여기 오실 수 있는 거라고 생각하고요. 꿈을 좀 더 크게 가지셨으면 좋겠어요. 제가 만날 때 좀 아쉬워하는 기업가분들이 누구냐면 저희 이거를 약간 개선시켜서 이렇게 하면 좋을 것 같은데요 라는 그런 종류의 비즈니스가 좀 아쉬워요. 오히려 좀 더 꿈을 진짜 조금 irrational하게 들릴 수도 있지만 좀 더 크게 갖고 한번 저희 사고 쳐보겠습니다 라고 하는 그런 사람들이 더 많이 나왔으면 좋겠다는 말씀으로 마무리할까 합니다.
감사합니다.
So I'm just going to repeat something. Again, I'll invoke my dad. He told me when I was 18, the advice he gave me was don't chase money. And we would argue all the time and this and that, but I do think that is very relevant because starting a company is very fashionable now. It's very trendy, especially in Silicon Valley, in New York. It's the next thing that you can look at, you can do where you get outside validation and you think that it can be a way to make a lot of money. And in my opinion, you should only do it if you feel like there's nothing else in the world you'd rather do. That's sort of a rational belief. And in a lot of ways, because I believe that, and we all believe, technology is going to be so important globally, if you don't have that in you, you should join a company that is winning. There's nothing better than joining a company that is making a huge impact. Even joining a company like Google that has 30,000 employees, I mean, they're working on things like a self-driving car. I mean, that is ridiculous. And to be a part of something like that can be as meaningful or more meaningful than starting your own company. And so I wouldn't do it because it's popular. I wouldn't do it because it might make you a lot of money. I would only do it because you have no other choice in your life deep down.
Yeah, thanks. John?
No, I just, it's not words of advice. I just want to, you know, 2 years ago, James, Gi-hong and I went to TechCrunch Disrupt in San Francisco. And we sat together and were saying over breakfast, wouldn't it be nice to have a conference like TechCrunch Disrupt in Korea too? And you know, you talked about entrepreneurs with a mission, and James is such an entrepreneur, and he just took that vision and mission, and he did the first one last year, and you know, this is the 1 year older version, and he's done a tremendous job, and I just want to thank him personally.
They ordered.
Yeah, no, and so I just want to give him and also to all the supporters that have helped, and all the staff members, and you know, this is I think a historic event. We have historic people here making history with us. I want to also thank especially the interpreters who did a tremendous job.
Yeah.
We've heard just because last year it was horrible, so want to thank the interpreters especially too. So those are my remarks. And,
so Jeff and Jimmy and Dave and John, thank you so much, and we are honored to have you here. Yeah, so
and thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Bye. Thank you, Dave. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you so much.
자, 비런치 2013 그 코트라와 함께하는 투자에 대한 모든 것 특별 세션이 이제 끝이 났습니다. 그 투자자가 투자 결정을 하는 그 과정은 흔히 결혼을 하는 과정에 많이 비유를 해요, 사실. 그만큼 고민도 많이 하고 또 때로는 결정도 빨리 일어나서 이 벤처 투자가 그래도 재밌는 것 같습니다. 그래서 앞으로 우리 비석세스, 비런치와 함께 계속 여러분 같이 가주시길 바라고 마무리 우리 정 대표님께서 해주시겠습니다.
네, 그러면 더욱 혁신적인 스타트업 생태계를 위해 내년에 더욱 좋은 모습으로 다시 찾아뵙도록 하겠습니다. 지금까지 비런치 2013의 진행의 정현욱,
이한정이었습니다. 여러분 감사합니다.
감사합니다. 감사합니다.